Okay. Wow. Meng, we are so excited to be here with you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
And this is all part of the Compassion Relay.
Cool.
The torch has been moving around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it finds us here with you, who is so clearly devoted to compassion and making the world right for peace in your lifetime and our lifetime. So we wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about how compassion unites and how you see it in the world.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So when we talk about global unity, which is the spirit of the games, we talk about a world of people with different nationalities and cultures and backgrounds and belief systems who are committed to living and working and playing well together. So for you, what is missing in order for there to be global unity in our lifetime?
I think there are three things: inner peace, inner joy, and compassion. I think compassion, global compassion, is what will ignite the conditions for world peace. However, compassion has to be sustained by inner joy. If there's no inner joy, compassion is not sustainable. And then joy has to be sustained by inner peace. So those all three has to come together: inner peace, inner joy, compassion as a system. And when we all have it, then there will be global unity, I think.
Beautiful. Got it. So for you, then how do you ensure that conditions for yourself? What practices?
I try to. I have three legs of practices. The first leg, there's a technical term, shamatha. It's calm abiding. It's calming the mind. Yes, I bring attention to my breath and my body. I come down, especially in challenging times, especially at the DMV or in traffic. Coming down. That's the first pillar. The second pillar of my practice is insight, and the technical term is vipassana. And the idea is to develop wisdom by seeing phenomena as they are, starting with the phenomena, starting the three processes actually: the process of emotion, the process of cognition, and the process of self. And by doing these three, gaining insight into phenomena. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is something that you're familiar with, my friend. Basically, kindness and compassion. So for that, I think there's a meditation piece. The kindness meditation, compassion meditation. But I think the bigger piece in this practice is day-to-day life. It's looking at human beings and thinking, the first thought is seeing a human being is, I wish for this person to be happy. I wish for this person to be happy. That's the first thought. And doing it for everybody I meet. So that's it, small things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was so stunned by watching your TED Talk is how you talked about play and compassion. And I would love to hear from you in midst of your practices, how do you really ground and have play be a piece of all of that?
I think the key sustain that we talked about before, the key factor that sustains compassion is joy. So the first good news is that compassion generates its own joy. Right? So according to scientific research, Matthew Ricard, for example, when he was being measured, he was in a state of compassion, and what was being measured was the highest level of joy ever measured in the history of neuroscience. So it turns out that compassion is an exceptionally joyful mental state. So if you can do that, it comes with its own joy, it sustains itself. So the question is, how do you get from here to there, right? Where before compassion appears to be joyful. Because the thing about compassion is it requires two things. The first thing is it requires action. The second thing is it requires seeing suffering. And seeing something initially is not comfortable. You have to see it and then want to act for compassion to really happen. So how do you get there? Right? So the first thing is the awareness, the recognition that it can be fun and should be fun. And second thing is, one thing you could do besides the wonderful work that you're doing, making it explicitly fun. Besides that, doing with people in community. Right? So if you're doing it alone, it's okay. When you're doing it with other people, that's where the power of and the joy of compassion really comes in. Because now everybody is working towards the greater good. I really liked the system that you built.
Thank you.
And one of the things I like most about it is visualization. It's the ability to see the impact.
Yeah.
Right? The reason we don't take action is because we think we're insignificant. We say, yeah, I clean up the beach, and then what? I'm nice to 3 people, and then what? Nothing happens. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But it turns out the sum, the aggregate of all our compassion action makes a huge difference. So therefore, if we can visualize, we can perceive the aggregate, that is huge. And that's why I like what you're doing. If we all take acts of compassion and then report it on one website, and we can see dots happening on the map.
Yes.
Then we can see, we can visualize impact. And then if you can go beyond that, which I'm guessing that you're doing already, which is also to measure the impact on people.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, then like see, and then see, oh, 1 million people got benefited, and this is my role.
Yes. Yes.
And then we can see that how, and you can see the aggregate, you can see that I'm not helpless. I'm part of really good.
Right.
Then they'll make it fun.
Oh, exactly. In fact,
Yeah.
when people report, they ask a couple things. Tell us what you did, but also reflect upon that action. What impact did it have on the people you served, and the impact it had on you?
Right.
And then we do have compassion impact measure. We say how many volunteers, how many hours of service, how many people served, money raised for local causes, and the elevation of seeing it. And some of the places where the games have been played will startle you. They played them in the prisons in California here.
Wow. That's
11 days without a single incident of violence.
That is cool.
I know, and so you're seeing there the actions happening and in places and people you'd never expect. Because you see often groups that don't know each other, if they come together to do service for another, get a totally different understanding of each other.
That's right.
And it isn't about the differences anymore.
Yeah.
It's not even that you're not alone anymore. And
Right.
yeah,
That's fascinating, because
it's really-
that reminded me of something about suffering and compassion. So the thing about suffering, a lot of suffering comes from the sense of self, right? From my identity, from
right.
numero uno.
Right.
So therefore, if the sense of self is diminished, then suffering diminished. And when you're engaged in compassionate action, what happens? The sense of self diminishes.
Yes.
Because it is about serving the other. So for during that period of time, I grew smaller. And because I grew smaller, my suffering grew smaller.
Yeah, right. Look at the rewards. You don't expect to find it that way, right? It's like you're diminishing yourself when you're in fact creating more space.
Yeah, diminishing the small
Enjoy.
self, but allowing the large self to be.
Yeah, and that oneness to actually be connected to something bigger. And you bring up a really good point earlier too about isolation and the loneliness factor that can be. And I wonder as well with your practices and the play, how do you stay connected and feel a part of the collective of the world and those visions that you have for world peace? How do you stay personally connected?
The thing about compassion practice is it involves more than compassion. And that is in my opinion. In my experience. Maybe because I'm not as good a human being as you are, so it took me longer to figure it out.
I don't know about that.
and I figured out that compassion is surrounded by 3 very important things. The first thing is calmness of mind. Right? And the reason is because to engage in compassion, you have to see suffering. And in order to see suffering in a way that you actually see it, you have to have a stability of mind. So part of practice is calming the mind, and also compassion itself helps to calm the mind. So that's the first piece. The second piece surrounding compassion is loving kindness. So the question is, what's the difference? Loving kindness is the wish for others to be happy. Compassion is a wish for others to be free from suffering. And they sound different. I mean, they sound the same, but the qualitatively different states. And loving kindness is easier because you're just thinking, I wish for you to be happy. And the reason it's easier is because you don't have to see suffering. Right? And for me, I think it's a precursor to compassion. Because first it's easy to do. Right? And once we do that a lot, that's wishing for people to be happy, then there's like the mind becomes inclined towards the welfare of others. And then eventually, the moment you see suffering, it has to morph into compassion. And the thing about loving kindness is it's very easy to be joyful in loving kindness. Because it's about joy, it's wishing for others to be happy. So if you practice that a lot, then it's also easier for compassion to be joyful. So that's the second piece. The third piece is after the practice of compassion, in my experience. So when the state of compassion wells up, what I thought I experienced, and there's a very nice Greek/Christian word, agape, divine love, pure love, right? And I think the joy of compassion comes from agape, comes from pure love. It is the ultimate expression. Compassion, I think, is the ultimate expression of agape. Agape, in a sense, is a mental state, emotion state. Compassion is the action that makes it happen.
Got it.
So surrounding compassion, there is inner peace, there is loving kindness, and there's agape. And so for my own practice, it involves this whole chain. Because for me, again, because I'm a weaker human being than you, if I just go around saying I want to be compassionate, I want to be good, it doesn't work because I'm so weak. Right? But if I do all the other homework, I start with calming my mind, and then I just try to wish that everybody is happy. Seeing a human being, I wish for you to be happy. And so that will work. Right? And also, like we said earlier, open my mind to the possibility that this whole thing is joyful. And then ending with agape. I think this whole package makes it easy for me to practice compassion.
Beautiful. So I'm interested about how peace fits into this, right? Because part of the gift of today with you is to honor the work of Peace Jam and the idea of 1 billion acts of peace. So I'm curious about your relationship with Peace Jam and about that work and how you see that fits in these practices and the idea of loving kindness and agape.
So my role in Peace Jam, I have a very nice job title in Peace Jam, Prince Charming.
Prince Charming.
Great job. You really do. I like the names.
So I'm co-chair of Billion Acts of Peace, which is a project from Peace Jam, which is the Peace Jam itself has been nominated 8 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. The Billion Acts project has been nominated 7 times. So one less than the organization. So I'm co-chair of that, and then I also get to choose a job title. And at first I was like, how about Grand Duke? And that's not good enough. How about Prince? And that's not good enough. I was like, how about Prince Charming? Everybody laughed.
So good. That's the one. You knew when everyone laughed.
That's right. So that's my role. Remember earlier I talked about these 3 things that we need in the world: inner peace, inner joy, compassion.
Yes.
In my opinion, there are 2 ways to do it, and both methodologies have been applied simultaneously. One is going in this direction, starting with inner peace, building inner joy, and then compassion. So both my books, Search Inside Yourself and Joy on Demand, are about doing this. Search Inside Yourself is about starting with peace. Joy on Demand is about starting with joy and spreading both ways.
Yes.
And then my work in Peace Jam is the reverse direction, which is beginning with compassionate action. Because what we do affects the people we become. So if we engage a lot in compassionate action, we become compassionate. So the idea is let's begin with action, compassionate action, and then allow that to feed back into joy and then to peace. And then towards that, so we're trying to begin, basically a lot of the same thing that we are doing together. Trying to create a world where compassionate action is the norm. Right now it is the exception. Right now nobody does anything, and then occasionally good people like you take action. Imagine if it's flipped. Imagine that the norm is everyone take action for compassion, and then occasionally some guys don't do anything. Right? How do we do that? And we figured the way to do that is to start with 1 billion. 1 billion acts of peace worldwide. With 30 Nobel Peace Laureates and some major companies and hundreds of NGO partners that you can, if you do 1 billion, then it triggers. It's like, what's the word? Not the
threshold.
The tipping point. It's a tipping point.
Right.
Then how do we do that? Couple of ways, and then one way is to have partners like you, like to work this together. And another way, the way I'm thinking about it, is crowdsourcing goodness. We crowdsource funding. Right? Why don't we crowdsource goodness as well? Right? And why do we want to do that? It's because people, I'm hoping that through crowdsourcing goodness, we don't just have people working together. We want to facilitate the growth of millions of leaders in compassion. Right? We have millions of ordinary citizens, ordinary NGOs and nonprofits to become leaders of compassion action. And right now it's hard. Right now it's like, if I want to start anything, what do I do? Like gather my friends, like go on Facebook, like what do I do? But if we have an infrastructure to crowdsource goodness, I want to do this, I want to clean the beach, I want to feed the hungry for a day, whatever it is. And that has a platform for everybody to participate, everybody to find out what other people are doing. Easy to record, easy to share, and easy to participate.
Right.
Then we have the possibility of crowdsourcing goodness. And goodness is crowdsourced, then it becomes a norm. I think.
It sounds good to me.
I'm happy to tell you that for all the agents of compassion that are playing in the compassion games, their points will count towards 1 billion acts of peace. So not only are they out doing good in their community, but they're part of this movement to get to that threshold, that tipping point of 1 billion acts of peace. So double your value of compassion by playing dirty games, and all those points go to
You should play even more.
That's right, even more. That hopefully.
1 million acts of peace here, 1 million acts of peace that adds up.
That's right, exactly. That's the dream. Oh man, it's such a joy to be with you.
It really
and
is.
to be in the presence of the vision that we all share, and then know that it's ours to do and be. So I don't know if there's anything, Sommer, you want to ask, anything you haven't said?
Well, one of the ways that we talk with teams too, because the idea around co-opetition is almost, there are people that kind of, scratch their heads, what do you mean? Like competition, we're competing, like I want to win. But we always talk about the more people that participate, the more that all of us win. And I just wonder how that lands with you and your work, and how, for people out there that are coming out of the frame of competition or coming out of a place where they think that maybe there isn't possibilities for a better world, like how would you approach that conversation with an individual that doesn't really understand the co-opetition, or that compassion really is the way, in life? Like how would you approach that conversation?
In Silicon Valley, there are 2 words that applies to this: network effect.
Network effect.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Network effect is when something becomes more valuable, the more people there are in that thing. The classic example is the telephone. The telephone network.
Telephone, right?
So if there are only 3 people in the world with telephones are useless. Nobody wants a telephone. However, if everybody has a telephone, then everybody else wants a telephone to get on the same network.
Right.
So every 1 person added to the network telephones make the telephone network more valuable. And then after the telephone was fax machines. Again, at first nobody wanted fax machines. And everybody had fax machines, everybody else needed fax machines. Right. And the same thing with social network. So it is with this that your idea of co-opetition makes perfect sense. Right? Because this network of goodness becomes more valuable when there are more people joining us. Right? And therefore, it is like the telephone, right? I mean, when people get telephones, they don't all agree on the same thing. They don't all do the same thing. Sometimes they compete with each other. However, regardless of that, the telephone network became more valuable. Same thing, right? If we all join into this movement together, and then even though we're competing, that we make the whole system more useful for everybody.
Right.
And we ask.
I get that for sure.
Independently, we asked both the Dalai Lama and the Karmapa about this with competition, and they both said the same thing. They said the kind of competition that push people down, not good. Competition where everyone rises up, this is very good.
Yes.
So it's a good thing for us to start to rethink some of these assumptions. That's why we have survival of the kindest, not just survival of the fittest. And that, like Sommer says, it's an infinite game, the games. The more people play, the more people win.
Yes.
The point is not to win or lose, but the point is to keep playing.
That's right.
And it's in that spirit that I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I look forward to many more conversations and sharing all the agents of compassion. This gift that you've given us, wisdom and practices for each of us to be the compassionistas and to reach that critical mass. Like the phone and the fax machine, where all of a sudden you had to have it because now you can reach others in ways we weren't able to reach before and overcome some of the social isolation and disconnection that so many people feel. But we have the strength to feel the pain and the hurt, but know that joy is waiting on the other side by reaching out and doing good.
Yes.
And speaking of joy on the other side, you have a book
Yes, I do.
that I think is on my other side.
That's right.
Here.
I ask you to tell us about this. Yeah.
Do the kind of white thing.
Joy on demand.
So, the thesis of this book is it turns out we have agency, or we have at least some agency on how we feel. Like we used to think that joy is something that comes from external conditions. Like something good happens, we are joyful. Nothing good happens, or something bad happens, we are not joyful. But beyond that, there are mental practices we can do so that we can create the conditions for joy, or rather access to joy. And then eventually it becomes a skill, like walking, like or like playing a ball game. It's a skill that we can develop and over time get better and better at it. And so the way it turns out that the three pillars of skill in accessing joy. The first is easing the mind. So the mind calms down, and the mind at ease turns out is a mind that is able to access a very subtle but sustainable source of joy. So the mind at ease is a mind of joy, and the joy can be used to reinforce the ease and it forms a virtuous cycle. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is inclining the mind towards joy. So the word inclining in the old scriptures is mental inclination is compared to the inclination of a mountain slope.
Okay.
The mountain slope is a certain way, the water flows effortlessly in the sky. So your mind is inclined towards anger. Effortlessly, always angry. But if your mind can be inclined towards joy, then effortlessly you find joy. And how do you incline the mind towards joy? There are a couple of methods. One of the simplest and most powerful one is to notice thin slices of joy.
Thin slices of joy.
When you're thirsty, you drink water. There's a thin slice, the thin in time and space. Time as in the 2-3 seconds of joy, and the joy wasn't like, it was like, it's kind of nice. But you keep missing them. So the practice is to notice them, pay attention to them, and by doing that, familiarize the mind with joy. And then once familiarize the joy, eventually it inclines towards joy. Change mental inclination. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is things that we've been talking about, uplifting the mind with goodness. The first with kindness, because kindness is very easy to do, and it brings about a jolt of joy. And then ending with compassion and altruistic joy. And it turns out that those things, kindness, compassion, altruistic, they're all trainable qualities.
Beautiful.
That's it. 3 pillars.
That's it.
Joy on demand.
Yeah.
Available at books also.
Is there a chapter about laughter?
All the chapters are about laughter except one. There's a chapter on pain.
Okay.
Yes, I figure I cannot write a book on joy without a whole chapter on pain.
That's part of life. Yeah. Great.
Beautiful.
Well, it looks like an incredible book, and if it's coming from you,
Thank you.
I'm excited to start reading.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Is there any other places that, if for those that are just meeting you and seeing this video, where would be the best place to connect with you, websites or things
Find
like
out
that?
more about your work,
Okay. So my full name, Chademeng, CHADEMENG.com. One word, chademeng.com.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And Peace Jam too.
Yes,
Peace Jam.
peacejam.org or billionx.org.
Billionacts.org. All right.
Peace Jam. Oh, I love all of them.
So let's fill that map with more expressions of compassion and action in the world. And I can't, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I'm counting in my lifetime as well that we reach that critical tipping point.
Yes.
And that we create the world that we dream of for our children and our children's children.
Yes.
Thank you, Sommer.
I can definitely see it. Everyone in the world smiling together.
Yeah.
I see it.
Joy on demand, and thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Mm.